important one, and this is what makes it so different from a tagline or a slogan, is it makes you buyable. If you don't do that, you're actually losing so much more because you'll be forgettable. It makes the thing that you do in your business immediately connect back to revenue opportunities.
You've said an ownable idea sparks an aha moment that reframes how people see the world, and it's not just a tagline. Can you talk through what is an ownable idea and why it's more important than ever in an environment where it's really hard to break through the noise?
Yes, I love this question. And I think what makes an ownable idea distinctive and separate from what you might think of as a traditional tagline is that so many people, particularly when you think about the B2B world, we have this depth of experience and we often want to kind of like word vomit everything we know onto our audience. But the reality is that it's really hard to get people to remember almost anything about you. And this is why it's so important to get your positioning really clear, why you want to like clarify your messaging. But if you can distill all of that down into something that is sticky and spreadable and kind of frames your unique point of view on the work you do, the problems you solve, you can get huge traction with that. So some folks that come to mind that have just done this at an epic level, people like Cody Sanchez, right? Like get rich building boring businesses. That is a great ownable idea. It has all of the characteristics of what I believe go into an ownable idea. Now, I've looked at like 100 different entrepreneurs who really have one thing that kind of became their breakthrough idea and defined like what are the characteristics of that. And I broke it into like 6 things. Essentially, it is revelatory, right? So it sparks an aha moment that reframes how people see the world. Think about Cody's, right? Like boring businesses. That is immediately interesting. And I know you come from the tech world, Varun. Before Cody started talking about this stuff, so many of us ambitious people thought the opportunity was to build a tech company. And now it's like she's presenting a new opportunity. That's revelatory. It's directive, an ownable idea. So it should tell people to do something, believe something, or become something. It's sticky. So it's simple, it's repeatable, it spreads easily. It's aspirational, so it offers a future identity that people want to walk into. Like we all want to be able to get rich, and the idea that we could do it building a boring business that's less competitive than maybe the insane world of like tech or e-com is nice. It's got to be something that's credible. You've shown proof, you have results, lived experience that shows that this idea isn't just some like nice sounding thing, it's real. And the most important one, and this is what makes it so different from a tagline or a slogan, is it makes you buyable. So it makes the thing that you do in your business immediately connect back to revenue opportunities. So that's kind of the 6 criteria. But I'm of the belief that in a world where we're all starved for like attention, that if entrepreneurs aren't able to really distill what they believe into something as compelling as an ownable idea, it's going to be hard for them to break through.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? Especially for like entrepreneurs or founders, like a lot of us might be more generalists, like myself, for example. So we want to cover a really large ground, but by doing so, you're not repeating a certain message and you're not focused on kind of like a specific ICP. So I think the challenge is like you're worried that you're going to get overly niched down, but instead you're going to get no traction.
I love that you bring this up because I think that an important distinction here is that in the work that we've done, so the concept of the ownable idea, it evolved out of me basically working with thousands of entrepreneurs, but through 2 of my main kind of programs. One is Unignorable, which was a personal branding challenge that I originally ran with the team at Demand Curve. And we had 1,000 entrepreneurs go through that. Many of them have gone on to become like the thought leader in their space. But then my other product was Painkiller, which is a messaging system that helps people to focus on understanding the problem that their product solves so they can frame their messaging better. And you have to understand that your personal brand strategy and the ownable idea, it sits on a strategic foundation of the right positioning and messaging. And your point about entrepreneurs being afraid to kind of narrow their focus is such a common problem. And it comes from behavioral science, which is like one of the most tried and true principles from the behavioral science world is loss aversion. Are you familiar with loss aversion?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So like loss aversion is this thing that shows up. You see it in everyday life all of the time. It was funny because like as soon as my son was born, I immediately saw him demonstrating it. It's such an innate human thing. And we're basically, we really are pained by the idea of losing something. And I think that the reason why so many people really struggle to narrow their focus, to choose one problem to solve, to choose one type target customer to go after, to offer one thing is because it feels like a loss. But we need to help them reframe that and see that if you don't do that, you're actually losing so much more because you'll be forgettable. Nobody will know what you do. Nobody will be able to recommend you. And so the ownable idea, it's really the cherry on top of a lot of strategic work that you need to do first. Like you can't just come up with this like snappy tagline and think that your business is going to explode. If you don't have the strategic work as the foundation, you need to do that first.
So where do you start?
You start by understanding really, so there's two elements to this. There's your personal brand and there's what you sell in your business, right? And for many folks, they might be clear on what their business does, but they haven't actually been able to use their personal brand to craft a narrative that attracts people to their business. So you have to figure out what your problem is first. Is it that you have, your offer's unclear, your business is undifferentiated, and you don't know who you're going after, and that's your problem. If that's your problem, you need to start there, right? You need to fix your offer. You need to fix your business positioning. If you feel like you've got that part right and your struggle is still actually getting people to pay attention, like your clients are happy once you get them, but getting them's hard, that people don't necessarily click with what it is you're doing. You need to explain it to people. People buy, but then they're confused. They thought it was going to be something different. If that's what's happening, then the goal is to focus on using your personal brand essentially as a testing ground to really strengthen the message that's going to pull people into you. So I say where it starts depends on diagnosing your own problem. Do you have a offer problem? Like that you don't actually have an offer? Because if that's your problem, then you should focus on figuring out kind of like what does V1 look like? And then use your personal brand to test messaging around that. What I love about the opportunity we have as entrepreneurs today is that before people would like go off and like hire some big consulting firm, help them figure out their business strategy, figure out their positioning, spend tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars doing this. And then they just put it out in the world and hope, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes it's based on a whole bunch of like research and whatever, but they're just hope. We get to be entrepreneurs leading our companies, being the face of our companies, and we can come up with, we can think about this stuff as an experiment and we can go out and test it. Like we can use our personal brand and our own content as like this incredibly fast feedback loop to see if it's right. So I think that part of the opportunity is starting to look at this stuff as an experiment and you'll see that things evolve. So using my own business as an example, like where I am today is very different than where my business started. And I would say that I've cycled through probably 4 different ownable ideas. And I'm getting, and now this fourth one is this idea of, don't just share ideas, own one. Like that's the new thing I want to be known for. But I'm able to kind of like cycle upwards because I found something that stuck initially, something that helped me to break out, something that reflected the business I was building at the time. And then because I got so much traction, optionality kicked in. And I was like, oh, I don't even want to do that anymore because this is a bigger opportunity. But I had to get that initial traction to be able to start getting to where I am now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And something that comes to mind is it feels like in a world where we're trying to build an audience and attention and a personal brand, a challenge or a mistake people may be doing is they're trying to build the personal brand and audience first without having an offer because they know that, okay, if I have an audience, I can test ideas. If I have an audience, I can sell. But if they're not clear potentially on what their offer is going to be, then I think that's when you might get stuck, where eventually you might build an audience, but you don't have an offer that matches that audience.
Yes, I love that you brought this up because I think I have a lot of gripes with kind of the traditional like audience growth advice out there. I think a lot of it is really useful for people who want to become an influencer, people who want to sell online courses, sell coaching. But if that's not your business, then that advice is going to totally lead you in the wrong direction. And the idea that you can just build an audience and then figure out what your product is, good luck. Almost everybody I know, I shouldn't even harp on these folks, but I'm just going to say it anyway. So many folks who built an audience ended up having to pivot to teaching people how to build an audience because there was nothing else that they had as a credibility point. They hadn't done anything else. They didn't have anything else to sell. So it's like, well, what do I freaking know how to do? How do I monetize this attention? Oh, I guess I'll just teach people how to build audiences. And that has become a very noisy space. But a lot of the people, it's one of those things like any industry where there's a few people at the top making lots of money and most of the people are making none because they built the vanity side of things. They focus on how can I go viral? How can I get as much reach as possible? And they weren't particularly strategic in how they were going to monetize any of that. And so I agree with you. I think that for most folks, building an audience is a luxury, but you still need to, before you dig in on that, unless you're in this fortunate position, which based on our early conversation, it sounds like you might be, where you've had some success in business, you've got some money in the bank, you don't have to figure out your next step right away. You're kind of in an exploratory phase. Go out and build an audience, have fun. But if you need to pay the bills, then figure out your offer first. Make sure that offer works. Then use the audience to amplify it.
Yeah, I think even in my position, not thinking through the offer was probably a mistake with the fitness channel because I built a lot of trust. Like the people trust me quite a bit. They've listened to hours of me talking and interviewing experts, but there's no offer. And when I started thinking about what the offer could be, they made me cringe inside. So I decided to do no offer. I was like, oh, I can sell a course. I can sell supplements that are overpriced when I think they should just buy it at Costco. And it didn't make me feel right. And I could see that's why people start teaching people how to build an audience because they feel stuck and they need to have an offer. So it definitely makes sense to have a crystallized offer, then figuring out what's the job to be done, then figuring out what's the ownable idea and kind of starting from what the offer is. And even if it's narrow, just being narrow with your messaging and your ownable idea. And then you could expand it, like you mentioned, if the optionality comes later down the road.
Exactly. And you pointed out something that I think is such an important mindset shift for people to need to make. So many of us want certainty. It's really attractive to have a degree of certainty in things. Like going into business is like jumping into the unknown, and we want to feel like there's something firm we can hold on to. But when you approach your offer, when you approach your, coming up with your personal brand positioning, eventually figuring out what your ownable idea is, look at it as an experiment. Be okay with the fact that this is about learning. And I love that you went out and decided to build an audience in a space. It sucks that once you really sat down and thought about it, you were like, I don't know how to monetize this attention because the ways that I can do it that are obvious are not feeling good. That sucks. But you also learned how to create a bunch of content. You learned how to get good at that. You learned how to turn that, to attract attention and build trust. All of that's transferable to what you're going to do next. So that was an experiment. And it was a good learning experience. And I'm sure that you're taking so much of that into what you're doing now. So I think a lot of us entrepreneurs need to give ourselves more grace. And I say this advice also knowing that I should be taking it, in that you're not going to have everything figured out right away. So much of this is about starting smart, not about having all the answers.
Can you maybe talk about something I've heard you say, which I find interesting, is this concept of message market fit? Can you maybe talk through what that is? And is that really just bundled in with the ownable idea in your mind?
I see that the ownable idea, the way I see it is the ownable idea is if you think about the pyramid of clarity, right? The ownable idea is at the very tippity top. There are people who have run very, very successful businesses that you probably couldn't point and say their thing is this in terms of like a phrase or like a sticky thing. Then there are people who are successful entrepreneurs that you could go, oh, I know that they've got them and like they're this and this and this. Like, Alex Hormozy is like a dictionary of ownable ideas. Like he's got so many good ones. I've got one of his as a post-it note on my computer right now. He says solve rich people problems, right? Like I love that. It's such a great idea. So the ownable idea is really kind of like the cherry on top. What makes it so powerful, if you do think about it like a spear, right, is that like it is way easier to break through with something super sharp at the top. But it doesn't mean with just like blunt force, you can't eventually break through. You can. So what I would say around the message market fit is that so often entrepreneurs, this comes back to the offer, right? So often entrepreneurs have built something good. Like the thing that they're selling is good. And the product is something that gets value for people if they understand it and they want it. But the problem is that they don't often understand it or want it. And that's because the messaging is off. So I often encourage entrepreneurs before you go and try to change your product, because like when people put a lot of time into a product, it doesn't exactly work. The first thing they usually do is they go, oh, I've got to pivot. I've got to pivot. It's like this famous and popular from the tech startup world, right? But pivoting feels productive because we want to do something, when in fact, what you should usually do is go, okay, if I still believe that fundamentally there's something good in what I've made, how do I repackage this thing so that people can see the good? And so often it's in the packaging, which I see as the messaging, that is the unlock for the opportunities. So before you go off and fix and rush to change your thing, think, how can I repackage this thing so that people get it better? How can I talk about this differently? Because it's way cheaper than trying to rebuild your thing or build something new or just jump to the next idea. And it's often that's going to help you figure out what people actually want. And one of the things that you hear a lot in the innovation world, but a lot of us struggle with actually doing it, is like sell something before you build it. And you should, if you can, do it, because that will help you figure out if you've got the messaging right. Like if you have an idea for a product and you can't get people to buy in on your pitch, then it may be that the product idea is bad. It could be that your way of delivering it is bad. And one of those is really cheap and easy to try to fix. And one of them is really hard and expensive. So why not work on the message market fit first?
Yeah, I totally agree there on the packaging. And I think you can actually, I think another challenge people have is they want the perfect packaging. So maybe they spent like, I'm going to do 2 months and I'm going to do this new brand launch. It's going to be a big deal. When what they should do is like, okay, what are like 10 different ideas I can test? And like, let me like run some Facebook ads or something against it and see like, do any of these actually convert more than our current messaging? Like just little ways where you can say, okay, can I make this, like you talked before, but like, how do I make this an experiment and not this like big, heavy thing that I'm doing for my business?
That like if your audience were to look at my LinkedIn profile right now, it is not reflective of where I'm going with my personal brand. It is reflective of where I've been. But I'm totally okay with that, despite it being uncomfortable, because I'm in this testing phase right now. I don't want to pour a bunch of time into changing my cover art, rewriting my headline, rewriting my like about section, because right now I'm just using my content and the feedback loop that content is creating to figure out, do I want to go deep into this? Am I on the right track with this? Have I nailed this? And so even though as a marketer and branding and positioning nerd, I know that I should be doing that overhaul of my profile, it's not the bleeding priority right now. The bleeding priority for us, so we're going to be running a private beta of Unignorable, which is our new version of it, which is not a group challenge. It's going to be a one-to-one. We work with you to help you figure out your personal brand strategy, figure out your positioning, and craft your ownable idea, and then test it through content. So we're actually going to be building a content co-pilot for our clients that is personalized. It's built on their strategy, their ICP, and our principles around what makes content that it builds authority. So that's kind of going on in the back end. But like I can test demand for this new thing without going through the process of, we don't have a website yet. I haven't overhauled everything on my social. Like I want to see that I've actually got something that people want before I put all of that work in. So I think as entrepreneurs, if you would have asked me like 10 years ago, 15 years ago when I started a business, there's no way in hell I would have been doing it this way right now. I would have already bought the domain. I would have spent months getting the website designed. I would like everything would be picture perfect before I told anybody about the thing. And I've learned from many mistakes that that is not the way to do it. So, we have to look at this as an experiment. We have to look at this. How can I get the fastest feedback loop? And content is the fastest feedback loop, whether that be you posting on your personal social, whether that be sending a warm intro out to somebody you think might be a fit, a DM. Like, content is the fastest feedback loop.
Yeah, something I've been thinking about, and this is like, it's not a ownable idea, but it's like my idea for myself is like how, as in, like, I'm not an engineer, so I'm non-technical. So as a non-technical person, how can I test any idea and validate or unvalidate it within 24 hours? Like, that
Hmm.
is kind of my thing right now for myself. Like,
I love the constraint of 24 hours because that's hard. And I'll say that, like, I would love to see you solve that problem because for me, the messaging is, and like, I like to describe it as like an iterative dance, right? Like, so I feel like to validate something in 24 hours, you might validate that the message isn't
sorry.
right in
Yeah,
24
not the
hours.
idea that
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
working, right? And then the next 24 hours you try a new ad or a new message or a new feedback, right? Like, and then at some point you can decide if, because I've done that. I've wasted like 8 months building products and then launching it to no one. So now I'm like, okay, how do I do it in 2 weeks? I'm like, forget it. Like, we have like AI avatars and we have prompts, we have Claude and all these tools that I'm using as like a non-technical person. And I'm like, how can I test something like in the next hour and then get feedback in the next 24 hours? Like, that's just where my brain's at.
I really like that. I think that'd be a great build in public thing because I mean, you think about James Clear's like 1% better every day. Like, I feel like you could build a narrative around that, and it would be a fun thing for people to watch. Because I think that every smart entrepreneur I know who has had any degree of success has lots of scars from fucking up, and the build it and they will come fuck up is generally the first big one we all have.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that that story would really resonate with a lot of entrepreneurs who have made that mistake, but still find themselves being too precious about things when they have a new idea. Still find themselves spending weeks or months when they know they should have, but it's easy to justify. So I like that a lot.
Is that the you're talking about showing like scar tissue and flaws? Is that the pratfall effect?
The pratfall effect will that can make people very attracted to kind of your message. So the idea generally yes. So the idea of the pratfall effect is that we like and trust things more that we see as imperfect, with a caveat that the imperfection doesn't reduce their utility. So let me explain the example of how they came up with this. So there was a panel of people that watched a whole bunch of interviews, and there was a guy being interviewed for a job. And in some of the interview scenarios, now that he's an actor, the people don't realize this, but in some of the interview scenarios, he mistakenly spilled a coffee on himself. And people rated him as far more likable when he made that mistake than when he didn't. But in other scenarios, he made mistakes that were interview questions that were related to his skill set. So like let's say it was a mathematician, like he said like 2 plus 2 is 5. In those cases, it doesn't work, right? If the thing that you're making a mistake at is the thing you're supposed to be proficient in, it doesn't make you more likable. It hurts your credibility. But when the thing that is kind of the mistake or the flaw is not something that like destroys the utility of the thing, we like it more. So another example on this is we prefer imperfect cookies. Like, we don't want our cookie to look perfectly round. Like, that to us feels fake. We know that a cookie isn't always going to be perfectly round. So when we see a cookie that is, it's less likable and less desirable than the ones that have a little bit of like a weird shape or edging. We prefer the ones that are imperfect. And so, yeah, when people like seeing your flaws, assuming that those flaws are not going to hurt you, the thing that you
Yeah,
do.
you wouldn't want to be a security expert for cybersecurity and your mistakes are security issues, then you've lost
Right.
all trust. But if it's
Right.
like you messed up your lunch or you spilled something or things that have nothing to do with that but make you human, then that's acceptable.
That's a great example. Yeah, exactly.
And so I was kind of digging through these cognitive biases, and I know you had like this viral tweet that got you, I think I was like over 2,000 newsletter subscribers. So what I wanted to do was throw out some biases and you tell me if you think in today's world, if you think it's overrated, underrated, or appropriately rated.
Okay. Do you want me to explain why or just choose?
No, explain. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Overrated, underrated, or appropriately rated? Okay. This is an interesting challenge.
Okay, so the first one is scarcity.
I mean, scarcity is appropriately rated. I think at the end of the day, again, there's a few of these biases that you just see show up in, consumer behavior in such a dramatic way. And scarcity, again, it's kind of like the little brother of loss aversion, and people respond very irrationally when you think about it from like the thing that they're responding to. Like nobody needs that pair of nylons just because they were 50% off. But when you think about where our brains developed from, in the fact that we grew up, we came our ancestors had incredibly scarce resources, and you had to make sure that every little bit counted. Otherwise, you were going to die, and people you love were going to die. And so the fact that we have this really innate motivation to take advantage of things that we know are scarce makes sense. So I think it's appropriately rated. I think there's a way to use it where your customers feel good and grateful. And I think there's a way to use it that is very manipulative. And so that's why I'm not going to say over or under. I'm going to say it's about the application.
This next one I think is interesting just because there's so much quantity happening with things like AI. So it's labor illusion.
I love the labor illusion. I'm so glad you brought up this topic. I think that labor illusion, because of what you just brought up, the timing, is completely underrated. And so people, to explain what labor illusion is to the audience, we are like something more that we perceive took a long time to generate, right? So if you go to a fine dining restaurant and you place your order and it comes out in 30 seconds, you are going to have a real concern about the quality of your food. You're going to be like, this isn't McDonald's. I was expecting something to be thoughtful presentation of this. That was too fast. It makes me suspect. It makes me think this probably isn't good. And I think with a lot of us being so excited to use AI in our delivery experience for customers and clients, that we need to be cognizant of the fact that even if the output that you get with AI in an instant is as good as what maybe a consultant might get by working with a client over a couple of months, even if the output is as good, the client isn't going to perceive it to be as good. I think that it's wise for businesses right now to build a little bit of perceived labor into their delivery, particularly if they're automating a lot in the back end. This is why, restaurants are a great example. People like restaurants more when you have that little viewpoint into the kitchen. We like being able to see the
Yeah, I
going.
do. Yeah.
Dyson is a great example of this too. Like when Dyson came up with his original vacuum, like he put an enormous amount of labor into that. I want to write a post about this actually. I think there were like 5,000 versions of that vacuum before it actually went to the market. But he got a lot of pushback from people on his team because he wanted to make the canister clear. And they were like, that's gross. Nobody wants to see their dirty stuff that they just picked up off the floor. Don't do it. And he was like, you don't understand. People want to see it's working. And guess what? He was really right. So talking about how many versions went into that product, huge, great narrative for him that taps into labor illusion, and then showing the actual work of the product with the clear canister, another great example.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of if you're doing a lot of automation, the illusion part of it. But what about just actually putting in the effort? Is that underrated over it? Like putting in real effort and time, not trying to play the behavior and the illusion side, but actual effort. Do you think that is underrated or overrated, or do you think it's part of the same thing?
I think that it's absolutely essential. I think that it's going to be the differentiator today that allows brands to thrive while others struggle, because people are more skeptical than ever. And we want to understand if we're paying for something that we're going to get our value from it. And I think that my first company was a branding agency, and we kind of like where I wanted to really focus was on guerrilla marketing, but I never did a great job of actually building demand for guerrilla marketing services. So we did a lot of branding projects, but our tagline at the time was rebel against mediocrity. because I think that there's so many folks out there that will deliver a mediocre experience. And if you can actually show that you go above and beyond, there's always going to be room for that. But you need to show it. And that's where people go wrong. This is what the labor illusion taps into, is like, if people don't recognize the effort that goes into it, you don't benefit from it. So you need to make the labor visible.
I think there's two different playbooks I see. I see people who already have huge audiences. They can spam 100 pieces of content on every platform and it's going to do well because they already have the audience and the trust. And it
Mm-hmm.
can be like lower effort and it doesn't matter. It's going to get shared, right? It could be like a one-liner on Twitter or something like that. And I think people who are trying to build an audience, they look at, those people and say, I need to do that. And I think that is a mistake because if they don't hit the quality bar as a smaller brand, it's just going to look like slop.
Yeah, I mean, I think this brings us to another cognitive bias that I think is really underrated, which is the messenger effect, which is the concept that the message matters, but who said it matters more. And what the benefit of building a personal brand is that you become a trusted messenger. A great example of the messenger effect and how meaningful it can be to a business was when Michael Jordan partnered with Nike, right? Like Nike wasn't actually that
I
big of a
see the
brand.
poster behind me. That's Michael Jordan. Yeah, so that's
Amazing. Nike was like a growing company, but they weren't anything in basketball. Adidas was actually like kicking their ass. And they were able to partner with Michael Jordan, come up with that beautiful, ownable idea, which was be like Mike, right? Which implied that like you could wear a pair of sneakers and be like this incredible person. And the cachet that they benefited from that association was massive. It was like anybody else, they couldn't have had the same messages and had somebody else deliver them and have them stick the way they did because it came from Michael Jordan. So I think that another really underrated technique is the messenger effect. Now you see this more and more with brands partnering with creators or influencers to try to deliver their message, but it's really about understanding who does your audience trust and how can we then align with, if we are going to have a creative partnership, how are we going to do it in a way that is aligned with who our audience trusts? Because you see a lot of brands that just go, who has the biggest audience that kind of is in our niche, and like let's pay them to post about our stuff. But those aren't always the best representatives of your brand. I mean, lots of people have learned that by paying millions of dollars to Kardashians and seeing no business benefit. Like, you got to be, it's not just about the size of somebody's audience. It's about the trust in the messenger.
So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to throw some images on the screen here. And the first one is your landing page. And I would love to understand what stands out for you as the cognitive biases that you've implemented here effectively.
So there's a few things we're doing here. So you can see that there's lots of directional cues. So there's something called the eye gaze effect, which is that we follow the eyes of people. So you'll see oftentimes this is used in ads where instead of, let's say it's a perfume bottle or it's a perfume ad, instead of the model looking directly out as though they're looking at you, they're gazing up towards the bottle of perfume. So the face attracts your attention, but then the gaze like directs your attention. So here I'm using this image of myself because I wanted to direct the attention up to the main message. And then I've highlighted the number of readers we have, and I've used a specific number there because specificity is more trustworthy, right? Like if I could have said 63K, I could have said 63,000 plus. Instead, I say something very specific. I say 63,353. And I use a comma because I'm trying to stretch that number out. Big, if you want a number to be perceived as big, stretch it out. If you want a number to be perceived as small, like a price, make it small, like reduce the size, right? So like if you're pitching somebody in your quote by email, you could just be like, hey, it's like 5K. Don't put a number sign. Don't put number sign 5000. That makes it look big. But if you just put 5K, like our brain goes, oh, that's small. I'm actually going to rework this message, the headline message, because I think that there's a bigger opportunity given the timeliness of what's happening in our world right now. But It's a message that the reason I went with this one was because it's aspirational, right? It's showing what they want to become, which is it's promising that if you learn behavioral science, you're going to be the smartest marketer in the room. And the type of people that we want to attract to this newsletter, given who our advertisers are, we want to attract oftentimes like in-house marketers at growing online businesses. So like SaaS, D2C, online businesses. And they're the ones who our advertisers want to get in front of. What do those people care about? Well, they care about career advancement. They care about making their boss think they're smart. They care about having their ideas taken seriously. So all of that is like reflective in that message, but it's also reflective to our secondary audience that's not as big for our advertisers, but much bigger for our own products that we sell, which is who what we call the marketers for hire. So marketers for hire run agencies, they're freelancers, they're consultants. And those people, again, they want to command respect from prospective clients. They want to pitch ideas that people take seriously. So it works with both of our audiences. I use a negation in the first line. I say, stop guessing what works. Negations attract our attention. It kind of like taps into that fear bias. We worry about potential problems, and negations kind of tap into those. And then I just describe what it is, right? Get the free newsletter, helping, very specific number. And then I say who it is, very specific, clear outcome, to sell more and look like a genius. That line, look like a genius, that actually came from a testimonial for one of our first products. And I've like peppered that in on so many of our products now, because probably your best copy isn't the stuff that comes out of your brain. It's the stuff that comes out of your happy customers' mouths. So what we call these buyerisms. And I try to find those and like plug them in where it makes sense. And then the thing that I think is we do here that's clever is we've kind of created our own category with the term buyer psychology, because technically that's not correct, but it's really easy to understand. So hear, if you hear like people in the actual behavioral science or behavioral economic world talk, they don't call it that. They call it behavioral economics. They call it behavior science, right? I was like, well, what do people actually care about? They care about getting customers. So I don't call it consumer psychology because a lot of our readers are B2B. So I started talking about buyer psychology, and it kind of allowed me to own that category. Like if you look in ChatGPT for like who are the top buyer psychology experts, I come up because buyer psychology wasn't really a thing. But like now, if you go into LinkedIn, I get people connecting with me on LinkedIn all the time who describe themselves as buyer psychology for agencies or buyer psychology for food companies. So it's picked up, right? And then we have, we tap into social proof. There's faces there of famous marketers. If you're in the marketing space, you're going to recognize some of the people that we have underneath the subscribe free button. And we're using arrows to kind of direct people to the thing we want them to do. So that's a little bit of what we're doing.
I think that was awesome. I love chatting, but I love having like the screenshot too, because then I can kind of understand how you think through it, and I find that to be super useful. I'm gonna put a few other images on here. The next one is some books.
Can I share one more thing that I think I forgot to mention? Go back one sec. Do you see how in the background I have the words aha, very kind of light?
I do. I didn't even notice that.
Rhyming. So like one of my favorite marketing examples is that this was done years ago when websites looked very different, but it was a company selling a mattress, and they tested different versions of their website, and on some of them they had clouds, and then they asked people what they expected the mattress to be like, and people they didn't notice that there was like this cloudy background. It was very subtle, but people would describe the mattress as like comfortable, like being on a cloud, and when they didn't have that, associations and the words that people use are different. So that's our way of kind of like priming people that like they're going to have like aha moments. Because I think the thing that we deliver are like, when I think about like the value that we deliver with why we buy, it's about having people read the newsletter and have an aha moment and be like, oh, I know exactly how to apply that to my campaign. Or like, now I can like use this as evidence for this thing I already wanted to do. So it's a subtle thing, but it was a thoughtful thing as to why we did it.
All right, so I'm going to put a couple of images here. Maybe just tell me what's the first thing that comes to mind with these people in these books.
The fact that I get to do a podcast with you and that these people are coming up and you're sharing this with me is, I guess, just excitement because these are some of my heroes. Bob Mesta I've got to meet personally, and he is every bit as amazing as people would think he is. But these are some of the influences that drew me into the work I do today and made me so excited about it. So Bob is one of the co-creators of Jobs to Be Done. He worked with Clayton Christensen to really conceptualize and popularize this concept. And if anybody's watched the famous Clayton Christensen video where he talks about milkshakes and why people buy milkshakes, he describes that his colleague went to a fast food restaurant and asked people why they bought milkshakes. Well, the colleague was Bob. And Bob is one of the most incredible and thoughtful people you'll ever meet in terms of thoughtful and just genius, but also really kind. But he discovering Jobs to Be Done and then discovering his interview technique that he calls the switch interview, where you basically recreate a timeline of why a customer switched from their old solution to their new one. And you really kind of get them to walk you through it in extreme detail. That discovery for me was really a catalyst to everything I'm doing now. Like, I was just so blown away by that. It was such a genius technique. Like, we spend so much time as marketers trying to just like assume that we can figure out all these like inner workings of the customer. And he's like, just fucking ask them. Don't ask them what they want. They don't know, but ask them why they've switched, and they're going to be able to give you insanely valuable insights. So yeah, that's Bob. Obviously, like Dr. Robert Cialdini influence, what an incredible book. I'd say a lot of people haven't read a book that I think is even better than that he wrote, which is Persuasion. So Persuasion is what you basically have to do and say and make people believe before you pitch them that makes them say yes. And so Persuasion is this idea of it's everything that comes before that makes them say yes. And I think that Persuasion is actually, if I were to only be able to read like, 3 books from behavioral science, that like Persuasion would be on that list. It's so good. Annie's book is amazing. Another one that really made me, I love the experimental thinking process of it, because I think we should give ourselves a lot more of that in our work, right? Like, everything you do is a bet, everything has a trade-off. And I think if we accepted that and stopped trying to make like perfect decisions, but made the best decision in the situation, we'd be a lot happier. And Seth, I mean, Seth is the king. I haven't read this book since, I don't know, probably like 16 years ago, because it was one of the first books I read as I got into marketing. And so I should reread it because it's been a long time.
All right. Next one has nothing to do with marketing, but tell me the story here for this image.
This is a great image. So I was invited, I formerly hosted a podcast. And one of my first guests was Rand Fishkin. Rand is so generous with his time. He's such an incredible human. And he had, before the pandemic, reached out to a bunch of marketers and entrepreneurs and asked them, do you guys want to come to Italy for like a founder meetup? And somehow I got on this list, and I was just like completely like, excited about being able to go on this trip. And then the world shut down because Italy was not a place you wanted to go in the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay.
You don't remember. So the trip got delayed by a couple of years, but eventually we did get to go. It was hosted at Balsamiq, which is Peldi, who's an amazing founder. Balsamiq was the first product that allowed you to do wireframes really quick, right? It was a wireframing product, and Peldi hosted it. He's got the most insane office. He designed the whole thing. You can tell the designer brain is there. And he showed us all around the office, and every room had a theme. Every room was incredible. And then the last stop on the tour was this one. And he had taken the photos of all of like a bunch of the attendees and put them up on the wall, and it was incredible.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love that. I saw that. I was like, that is hilarious. All right.
It's so good.
I'm going to end today with, what's probably the most important thing. So you've said watching bad reality TV is a form of meditation, and my wife would agree with you. So what's your Mount Rushmore, your 4 favorite trash or bad reality TV shows of all time?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, a guilty pleasure for sure is Selling Sunset. It's hard to watch too, because I'm like, they're so mean to each other. Like, why are they so mean to each other? But that's a good one. I just finished watching This Summer I Turned Pretty, which is like a stupid like teenage love story one, and it was just just bad TV at its finest. What else would go on that list? I mean, Love Is Blind is another great one. Love Is Blind, I think, is more hopeful than something like Selling Sunset. Like, there's always heartbreak in Love Is Blind, but it also has a hopeful message that like you can fall in love with somebody for their personality, which I like. But then you get to see all of the kind of my favorite of all of the shows, and I hate to admit it, is the reunion shows when they bring people together because like all the
Yeah.
all
The
the
so
like
much drama.
exactly like all the stuff that comes out in the back end is like this one didn't actually happen, or like you never saw this part, and I'm always like whoa. So those are probably my like three that come to mind. I don't get to watch a lot of TV. I've got a 4-year old, so usually if I get a half an hour a night, I'm pretty happy.
For sure. Yeah. So like what ends up happening is like my wife will watch these shows and then I'll kind of like sit and pay attention and then I'm like, who's that character? And then all of a sudden I'm like into it. I'm like, when did
Oh,
this happen?
my husband is the same. Yeah, he'll be like, "This is so dumb," and then he'll be like, "Well, what did she say that for?"
Yeah, I think that happened with Love is Blind. That happened with like Jersey Shore back in the day. But yeah, it is what it is. You know, it's good to turn your brain off, so it's not a bad thing.
This is it. We all need to be able to do that, right? And I find that like I often I'll be scrolling while I'm watching TV because I'm just trying to like I get a lot of comments on my content and I want to engage with people personally. I don't hire somebody else out to do it for me, so I'll use my like TV time to try to catch up on some of that. And I can be reading and responding on text like on social and still follow the plot line with what's happening with all this trashy like reality TV. I can't like watch like a drama like and
Sure, there's certain shows or movies you like have to pay attention to, and
Mhm.
that's a no phone situation. But Netflix in general has made all of their content, for better or worse, like phoneable is I think what they call it, where they've made it assuming you're going to be on your phone for the whole time, so it's like dumbed down.
That's as great. Like as we end talking about jobs to be done, Netflix is an incredible example of a company that really did interesting things in jobs to be done world and what they're doing now, coming with games, all these other things. I'd never heard the phoneable thing. Would love to do a case study on and mention that. That's great.
Caitlin, thanks so much for your time. Where can everyone find you?
Thank you. I'd say the best spot to find me would be on Twitter, and I'm at Kate Bour, Katebor, and on LinkedIn, I'm Katelyn Bourgoin.
And thanks for your time.
Thank you.